Okay, so welcome back again, everyone. My name is Toby Berkman from the Consensus Building Institute. We are here for our June 5th RAB meeting. So I will briefly review the agenda again, just because some of you may have
Technical
joined.
presentations. Next slide, please. This is a rough idea of the.
All right. Don't want that. All right, get this going again. There we go. Okay.
Answers throughout the evening. Please use this opportunity to view these slides.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, I'm gonna verbally go over the, all right, I'll cut that out. I think this will help. Sorry about that. There we go. Okay, so you can see the agenda here. In a minute, we're gonna take a Q&A on the technical presentations. We have some more updates here you can see on your screen. We're gonna talk about the private wells. Community involvement plan update. We plan to have a break at around 6:30, we hope, for folks to get some refreshments, use facilities as needed. Then we're going to have a presentation on the P's 5-year review and some of the community comments and questions that came in on that. We expect at around 7:15 or so to be turning to RAB community member topics of interest. We have some issues around monthly newsletter reporting on site 8, community foam sampling, and EPA's MCL announcement. An update from the city of Portsmouth on drinking water. And then for those of you who are joining from the public, we expect to be doing public comments at around 7:45. So if you want to say something, sit tight and we will get to you. But for the rest of the meeting, it's the RAB members at the table who will be welcoming comments and questions from. We will have some recap items at the end and next steps, and then we plan to adjourn at around 8 o'clock. So with that, let me go around and do a round of introductions. Again, I'm Toby Berkman from the Consensus Building Institute.
I'm Aarti Halbe, also from the Consensus Building Institute.
Oh, sorry. Mike Daly, EPA. Peter Salmon, Department of Environmental Services Project Manager.
Paul Roy, RAB member. I'm Chris King. I'm the Air Force Program Manager for Peace and also the co-chair for this RAB.
Brad Conley, RAB member.
Andrea Amico, community RAB member co-chair.
Mike Conahue, RAB member. Al Pratt, Water Resource Manager for the City of Portsmouth.
Keith John, Hampshire National Guard.
Tom Gerhard, Environmental Engineer for WSP. Bill Lilly, Project Manager for WSP.
Stephen Cochran, Environmental Scientist for WSP.
Haley Planner, project hydrogeologist with WSP.
Great, thanks so much. Let's go to our RAB members joining online. Let's see, David.
Who's presenting?
Oh, David's presenting, okay.
This is just Jared.
Okay, Jared, go ahead. You might need to unmute Jared.
Jared with the Peace Development Authority.
Okay. Great. Any other RAB members online or in as an attendee that's not promoted to a panelist?
There's Huddy.
We do have Huddy joining as a has not been promoted, but I think did decline. She declined too.
She
Okay.
just accepted.
She just accepted. Okay. Huddy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Huddy Grandy, community RAB member.
Great. Okay, welcome, Huddy. Okay, so we just have one quick order of business. We have to approve our summary from the December 2024 RAB meeting. So we sent that around. We got some minor comments that were sent back in red line to the group. There were none since then. So with that, are there any edits, revisions that anyone else wants to suggest, or can we consider this approved? Right, so hearing none, we will consider the December 2024 RAB meeting summary approved. We can now move on to our Q&A on the technical presentations. So floor is open to RAB members here in the room and online for any questions you'd like to ask regarding any of our three technical presentations. Great. Okay, Andrea, please.
I'll start with the questions for Tom. So can you just tell us why you did the stormwater testing? Like, is it regulatory requirement or what was the purpose behind this?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that question.
I can expand on that a little bit. So, you might recall from the original RI work plan, we had done a first, round of PFAS sampling across the stormwater system. So that started with some of recon. We did a bunch of recon of the catch basins, and then we did a base flow. So no storm influence sampling ground. And then we returned a couple months later after a significant storm event to then understand how, from a high level, the nature and extent of PFAS in the storm system that was being conveyed by the storm system and how that varies during base flow versus a storm event. So we understand that the storm water system at Pease, that system it functions to keep the airfield dry. So it does convey groundwater, and in certain portions is below the groundwater table. So the intent of the 2024 effort was building upon our initial understanding from the 2021 effort that was really focused on nature and extent to provide a more focused understanding of mass discharge. So instead of the concentrations in the system during these different conditions, it was looking at, okay, we have these outfalls, and so how can we better understand what the mass discharge at these outfalls actually is? So that was the study that Tom designed, so that we can use that also to help start informing some of the FS. Okay, thank you. So would that explain why some of the PFAS data was reported in grams versus like parts per trillion? I'm sorry, I'm not an engineer, so I'm doing my best to wrap my head around this stuff.
Yeah, I was just, that was just a cumulative graph, was represented in grams just to show cumulatively how much is discharged. It's just a unit.
Yeah,
Could have said 10,000, you know.
it's converting the flows that Tom collected and taking the concentrations of the samples and then converting that to a mass amount rather than a concentration, which is for a set volume. Okay. Yeah.
You can do this for groundwater too, so you can actually calculate what that, like what a mass discharge is over per unit, you can figure out. So it's a good presentation of, you know, what kind of mass is sort of moving through the system. So.
The analytical results are presented in micrograms per liter. Sure you're familiar with that. And so by identifying a volume of water, as we did per 10-minute time step, we're able to multiply the concentration by that volume, cancel out the essentially gallons per minute, or micrograms per liter to give us a micrograms per minute mass discharge.
I see. Okay. Did you test the rainwater concentration because you set up a rainwater
Range gauge, yeah, just
So it didn't trap rainwater, it just was telling you how much was
measuring, correct.
Okay, because I know UNH has done sampling to show there's PFAS in rainwater, so I didn't know if that was that, but probably didn't apply here.
You want to mention that, though? That's important. I mean, you did collect the data point relative.
That's true. We did. I don't remember what do you remember what the results were?
Yeah, we did do one rainwater sample during the December event.
Yeah,
The second
it
event?
wasn't an objective going into the stormwater sampling process of collecting rain, but it came up during the day when we were here for RAB last month. That maybe we should try to do that. So we collected one, yeah.
Yep, we collected a rainwater sample, and I believe the result was Three PPT for PFAS. And that's it. Water. That's what I go off the.
That's, I think that's right. That's right.
Yeah. And but it seemed like you'd only tested for 4 PFAS.
That's what I included in my presentation.
Oh.
We tested for the full suite of 40.
Okay,
I just highlighted those 4.
okay.
Those are our primary.
Did you see other PFAS detected though?
I didn't focus on those.
Not in significant amounts. Yeah.
Okay. And then, it seems like this was done in November and December. Would you repeat it again at different times, like seasonally, would you expect different? Or it just would be like storm dependent, I suppose?
I would think it would be more storm dependent than seasonal dependent.
Okay. That's it for my questions on that part. I've asked a lot, so if anybody has any other, I do have some other site 8 and the eco risk, but.
Let's just check in if there are any questions on room on stormwater before moving on. Yeah, Michael, go ahead, please.
A lot of people were. Actually, anybody in the public, it would be helpful if you. Showed a map. That identifies where these faults are, but before they can sample.
Yeah, I included that on one of the slides. It was just hard. It's a large map with small.
I understand, that's why we've been urging constantly to divide the site as.
Right.
As Steve did, which makes would make it a lot easier.
Yeah.
So, but do you have anything you can put up tonight that people can see where Flagstone Brook North and South is?
Yeah, one of the slides.
It's the key to understanding the report.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure if we can go through that slide deck, but.
Where were you? So this is the eco risk assessment. Go back up. Yeah.
I think it's down one. Where we're at. Yep. So those 2 figures on the right are kind of. Splits, sections of the overall watershed map, but, kind of tough to see, I guess, on the bottom.
Pointer.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you go to the left a little bit on the bottom, that's McIntyre Brook. That's the main outfall for the actual airfield that drains the whole area C there. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
So that outfall has, it's a main outfall. It's a 10-foot diameter outfall, huge pipe. It has essentially a diversion that goes to an oil water separator. And we did not see any flow at the main culvert, over either of these storms. So even the 2-inch storm, didn't put any overflow into that main culvert. All the flow went to the oil water separator. But that's why we put 2 locations in there. The primary purpose of putting the flow meter in the main culvert there, because it's the same water flowing out both of them. We weren't planning to sample both locations, but we wanted to identify what the design flow rate of that overflow weir in that main pipe is. We would have seen that had we seen water flowing into the main pipe, but unfortunately we didn't, so we didn't hit that peak discharge, but
That's good news.
yeah. And then if you stay on this bottom figure and move over to the far right, that's the Newfields ditch location. And so that's right at the corner of New Hampshire Ave and Newfield Street, Newfield Road. That's a 60-inch culvert. It drains that green area. And then moving up. Paul Brook is that location shown there. So Paul Brook is actually the one location that is not a actual stormwater culvert. It's a culvert below a road that drains that wetland area view. There is some culverts that discharge into that area. So it does convey some stormwater, but we just wanted to sample that location.
So that's like basically almost alongside the Spalding along Arboretum.
It's right on Arboretum, yeah. It goes right underneath Arboretum.
It's just helpful for people to know.
Oh, for sure,
where
yeah,
this is.
yeah. And then moving over to the left on the image, we get to Flagstone, north and south. So those 2 locations basically just drain the North Apron. Mostly sheet flow runoff from the North Apron there. We do have some drainage from the ANG going into that location, but mostly from that North Apron.
So are they? I thought I knew everything about Site A. So are those, is that like west of Site A or?
East. I'm not sure if we can go anymore. I don't know if say it's shown on this, but yeah. you can kinda see
it. It's
Yeah.
the north,
Just off the image. to the left there.
the north.
Yeah,
I should have, we call it the north ramp.
right.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, those are the locations.
So those two locations had, not a lot of flow, but.
Yeah, very low flow,
But had higher
correct,
concentrations.
right, specifically during the first one.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
That was your comments,
Definitely helped.
Michael?
So seeing no other placards around the room or hands up online, Andrew, do you wanna, ask your other questions?
Sure, yeah. So site 8, you talked about sludge removal.
Hmm.
Where does that go? Does that go to the landfill for classified?
Subtitle C, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Regarding Ames, you talked about the challenges with not being able to extract if the water table is low or re-inject if the water table is high. So what do you do with either of that happens? Do you shut down or you just significantly limit what you do?
Just limit, we just maximize what we put in.
Okay, you never like shut it off,
Never.
it's just adjusting, okay? So with this site 8 upgrades, so in the end, I know the sand filters are in. And there's gonna be more carbon, but I thought I saw something about the resin. Is the resin going away?
No changes to the resident at all.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it'll still be, essentially the sand is to get rid of the iron.
Residual iron that's getting
Manganese.
through the clarifier, right?
And then the resin in the GAC is still what's addressing the PFAS, okay. But it seems like from Chris's latest report, it's still there's, like, I think that it said 52 gallons per minute at site 8 compared to 278 gallons per minute at Ames. So there's still a pretty significantly lower, efficiency at site 8 right now.
Yeah, I mean, the systems are designed for widely different flow rates. So we're never gonna get the flow rates that we see at Ames, and so they have.
Yeah, there's different requirements for Ames versus site 8.
So what is
Regards
the,
to-
at site 8?
120 GP.
Okay, so it's operating at essentially like 30, instead of 122?
120 is the target, yeah.
I think that is it. Oh, has there been any, I know everything goes to a Class C landfill. Is there any thoughts or discussions about considering other destruction technologies? I don't know if that's more of an Air Force question.
Yeah, I can handle that one. Currently, there's still, they're still debating that. There is still a ban on incineration for us. Other technologies are still kind of being field tested. There's not really anything that would be viable for our concentration levels other than incineration. They're still moving towards that as an option. Obviously, they're going to put conditions on that as far as, destruction capabilities, temperatures, things like that, making sure they get an EPA permit. I don't know when that's going to change, but we're still in that holding pattern.
Okay, so everything's still going to a Class C
Correct.
landfill, okay. All right, I think that's it for the site 8 and Ames questions. I do have some people risk assessment questions too. Awesome.
Okay, we'll turn back to Michael, go ahead.
Does anybody else here want to dominate? I mean,
I'm looking around.
I
I
love
don't
to
see
talk
anyone. If you are
after.
wondering if you should ask a question and you're not Michael or Andrea, we would encourage you, but but in the meantime, go ahead, Michael.
Okay, thank you. So. Your report had a lot of information about things that are, and this has really been the nature of the reporting for the last maybe a year about all the things that are going to come that are going to improve site 8. And some of them are already in place, and a lot of it related to removing non-conforming equipment that was there for other purposes of the methanol, all the things that you have to do the next step. But what's missing is never like a goal or objective of when is site 8 going to perform at 120? When, what is the target? That's what the public wants to know. That's what people wanna know.
Yeah, so the upgrades are scheduled to start in September. Targets to have that done by January, so we'll be
Okay.
hopefully offering that.
So
on
January,
by early 2026.
okay. That's great. Don't be afraid to say that to people. It won't, no one's gonna yell at you, oh, geez, it's not till January.
Right, and
People
Mike,
just wanna know it's,
yeah, Mike, that should be in the newsletter I just sent out, the schedule, the expected schedule was in. With the upgrades is, I include that in there. Obviously, things are moving along, but the manufacturing has been slowed down of late with the. Other hiccups in the economy and all, but it's moving along nicely. And, but yeah, that's our current schedule, so thanks.
thank you.
Yeah, you got it.
Because currently. You know. The last 2 months have varied between 22. And 52, and the average is 40. So it's just, this is broken record, this is the one place where you know where it is for sure. It's the one place where you can impact a chemical that has apparently a long life from continuing to leach the community. It may be that it's within where you want to see it for purposes of your temporary order to them to deal with Site B. But when you see what we're seeing with Flagstone Brook, you get further down get further out going towards the north end of Bloomington and Tricky's Cove. It's continuing to be there, whether it's, and it's gonna accumulate. It's not gonna not accumulate, it may be coming out at lower levels, that's an achievement, I mean, until you did this, that wasn't happening, but this just goes on and on, so. January sounds great. Maybe I'll stop coming.
We hope not, Mike.
We need you.
Mike, are you, do you have another question for Tom or?
No, I'm done beating up on Portland.
Alright, thank you. Andrea,
Yeah, eco risk assessment, so it seemed like there was some gaps in what you were able to sample. Stephen, okay. The fish, you got 17 out of 21, and invertebrates, you got 13 out of 24. So is there a plan to go back out and try to fill those gaps, or is the sampling done?
I don't know if there will be any plans to go back out. I do know that even from the limited number of samples we did collect, we can still see those trends and still potentially build those update equations. So I think that might be a discussion after the data is done being processed. But at this point, I just don't know.
For the RI's purposes, there wouldn't be any more collection being performed because what we collected is enough to perform the analysis that we performed.
Okay, and do you have a timeline as to when this data will be analyzed and released in a report for the community? I've heard like August at one point, but I don't know if that's still accurate.
I mean, as far as like a final RI report that has been reviewed by everyone from like the regulators and everything, we're talking about like an August, September timeframe, 2026.
What
I
about the
don't know
risk
when
assessment?
for like this data.
Yeah,
Data on this is expected to be through analysis in November of this year, I think, and then I guess we would probably go through some form of Air Force review before it'd be ready to be shared, so. As far as like something that like a RAPID being able to share results, it would probably be early 2026 timeframe, I would assume.
Yeah, we have no plans for like a second round of ITIR, but once they're done doing their analysis and we can make sure it's, accurate and complete, we could probably do a tech session.
okay,
Get you guys a data dump if you say what's the figures and then have a little tech session.
okay, but you don't anticipate any more opportunities to sample? No, this is it.
No, we've got to start writing the report and performing the actual risk assessments, which is extraordinarily time consuming, especially on sets.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's it for my questions. So that's it.
Okay, great, Michael, we'll give you back the floor. Go ahead.
Great batting second when the leadoff hit is the MVP. So, Steve, with you said in your report that in terms of fish, some places where you didn't get fish or other samples that you were looking for, that you did shellfish
I collected amphibians.
and no shellfish.
We collected shellfish for invertebrate sampling
Yeah,
at
okay,
the
sorry.
estuary locations.
So what were, Mark Madsen would want me to ask, where were the locations where you elected or were able to take shellfish?
Yeah, so we targeted a lot of the end of those kind of drainage basins. So off the top of my head, I know.
Can you use the map?
Oh, yeah. We'll pull that up. But it was a lot of the cove, I know, Harad's Cove, we collected shellfish. There's Turkey's Cove.
Maybe, let me know if you want me to go on the slide.
No, this one.
He's
Yeah,
got all
that's
the
the,
devices in now.
terrestrial one. You wanna moving that? Yep, those two there. Yeah, so we collected some background location at Royals.
Can you blow it up a little? Please. Thank you.
Turkey's Cove, Rod's Cove. We did one at the outlet of McIntyre Brook into Great Bay, collected shellfish from there. Pretty much all of these outlet locations where it goes into the bay and into the river are where.
So
Yeah, shellfish.
I couldn't hear you, the one you said after Tricky's Cove.
Oh, the outlet of McIntyre Brook.
No, but in between you said.
Is it Broad Cove?
Oh,
Broad
Broad
Cove,
Cove, yep.
okay.
Thanks,
good.
Broad Cove.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's
It's all of them.
definitely oyster
Big.
population there. Is that, what were the shellfish that you sampled?
They were mostly oyster. I think there were a couple locations where all we were finding were red mussels. But for the most part, yeah, it's oyster.
And did you sample? Other than down to the south where McIntyre Brook runs out, did you sample any shellfish on the west side of the peninsula?
There was
Yeah,
one
you
location.
gotta go the other way.
Where you want me to go?
Yeah,
Yeah, to the right. Might be on the, yeah, might be on the next figure.
yeah.
Oh,
So-
no, there it is.
That's fine.
That's all right.
Where you want me?
Down to the bottom right of that figure there.
There you go.
And so the
The field called Brook.
Brook, yeah. That I believe was shellfish collected there as well. That one, I don't recall the exact species off the top of my head. But
Right.
That's on the east side, but on the west side.
on the
You're
western
curious about
side.
over here.
On the western side, it would have just been Harad's Cove at the end of Beverly Brook and Subspawn, and then the outfall of McIntyre Brook. Those are the only two on the western side.
So did you do any, so you didn't do any sampling at the unnamed brook that comes out from the pond to Captain's Landing?
No.
And nothing from there north all the way out around Fox Point and all that?
Correct.
All right. If we can, you have another question? Okay, Paul, maybe we'll do this one and then I want to encourage us to move to the next.
Sure, I
agenda
want to
if
go
we
back
can.
to Stephen on that. We do an awful lot of oyster farming in this area. By any chance, did you sample any of the oysters that are farmed? Because that could be, very interesting to hear the result of that.
No, anything we collected would have been what was just along the shoreline locations.
Okay, but the oysters are farmed on the shoreline areas and you're showing 100%. In your testing that the PFAS was in the oysters that you tested. Correct. I think that's what the graph showed.
Yeah, can you pull back the quantity?
Let's see what. How are we here? This is the right slide?
Yes.
Smaller, 79%.
Right.
And that's all aquatic invertebrates, so it's not
Right.
exclusively shellfish.
Right.
But there's something in here that says every shellfish sample. Had it, right?
That's what I thought I read. Could be wrong. But I think it would be important to test some of the oysters that are being farmed only because that could be very interesting.
I'm sure, but it's their oysters, they should be tested. So we just tested the estuaries where we're discharging.
I understand that. But there's a large industry in those coves.
Sure, there's also a lot of other sources.
I understand that.
So can I ask, does this data get shared with DES?
Not initially, right?
No, it's a
yeah.
normal process, yes, it's a normal
We're
process.
seeing it now.
Because,
Yeah.
you know, the question is, would any of this lead to any possible do not eat advisories or any recommendations? That would come from DES, right?
Yes, certainly through the review, formal review of the eco risk assessment. Will be through our environmental health program, risk assessors and shellfish program. Absolutely.
All right, so let's press forward to the next agenda item. I just want to confirm with you because I have one slide.
Just
here.
one slide.
Just one slide, okay,
And
so we're gonna.
I'm expecting, questions and discussions, and if it, otherwise we'll make up some time on this. I think you allotted me 15 minutes for this. It's a bit much. But, so yeah, just click over to my slide, please. The private wells. So Kirk, and working with Mr. Willingham, with a New England selectman, he asked that I contact everybody that was tested and had an MCL exceed based on the latest EPA promulgations of MCLs with PFAS. I went ahead and did that. I wasn't able to reach all people. For those folks who didn't answer their phone and have not yet responded to my messages, I think there's one left that I have to contact, but I communicated to them what their results were. You know, what the future Air Force plans are. Which relates to, the worst first approach. To mitigation efforts, which we're working on that contract right now. It's probably going to be awarded in the next 4 to 6 weeks, at which point we'll kind of get going. But yeah, basically I told all the residents, to contact Martha Roy. Down in Newington to take advantage of the state-run program, which I believe, Peter, you mentioned was up to $5,000 reimbursements for immediate actions and $10,000 if they wanted to go ahead and get connected to the municipal system right out of the gates. So I don't know, I was hoping somebody else from the selectmen would be here to let us know if any of the residents have taken advantage of that, but no one's here. But that's the plan, so we are gonna get that contract in place. And get going on our worst first approach. Once we clear some of the obvious initial contracting hurdles. I put that second bullet in there, the 2 bullet holes you all are aware of that are barely above the MCLs. Per the policy, nationwide, they're addressing worst the first. So it's gonna be some time before those public wells are addressed. That's basically what that's saying. I have no timeline for you other than, everything across the programs are following that worst first approach. So other than that, I will field any questions on this or discussions.
I have a question.
Fire away.
Can I ask a question of the audience? Or just-
No, if you're part of the public, it has to be here.
And I
Yeah.
spoke with you on the phone.
Yes.
Liz Potter's my son.
Okay, so ma'am, we do really want to hear from you. We'll do it during the public comment
Oh,
portion of the
okay.
meeting. I'm so sorry,
Yeah,
but
no,
yeah,
I did.
if you could hang tight.
Sure.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, Andrea, I think you had your hand up.
So I just have a few questions. So just to be clear, how many private wells exceed the EPA MCLs? I think it was 21 you told
It's
us?
21 current, yes.
Okay, and then I think last meeting you told us there were 5 that met the 3 times above the MCL?
It's 4 after a resample, so it's gone 5 to 4.
Okay, and so, but you've contacted or made an effort to contact all 21?
The ones that have been sampled, so there's another round of sampling coming up. Where all the people in the private well program are going to be sampled. So after that sampling event, then we'll have 100% coverage for sure. But yes, I've contacted everybody that had sample results, obviously, because I wanted to discuss their specific results with them and kind of where they are in relation to the overall. So not everybody has been contacted because that full list of sampling is coming soon.
What does that mean soon?
Brandon, when's the?
It's the next round?
Next week, apparently,
So next week, you're gonna sample all the private well owners?
that are in a part of the program.
Okay, and then if they're, even if they're above the MCLs, not 3 times above,
Yeah, contact.
you'll contact
Yes.
them. And then, am I understanding correctly, you're gonna offer to tell them to touch base with the state?
Touch base with the selectmen first. Ms. Roy is running that program locally from Newington
Okay,
on behalf of the selectmen, and then yes, I guess from there, it's up to them. I'm not involved in that state program.
correct. So it sounds like the Air Force is not gonna intervene though. You're just gonna defer them to use.
For
this-
the time being, until the Air Force gets around to it, following our policy of worst to first. So the state offers them a nice little immediate response, if you will,
Right,
while they wait for, Air Force response.
okay, and then the Air Force will reimburse the state?
No,
So what if someone says, I'm just gonna use the state program, I'm gonna use the rebate program to put, a filter in my house? Like, if that's already in place, what else would you offer them?
they would go through the same process as anybody else. Likely it's going to be offered one of the 2 things that are most effective and based on cost, it's either a connection to the municipal or a whole home POET system.
Okay,
Right, so if they put in a filter, a point of use filter in their kitchen, they're not taken out of the program.
okay,
They're
so that
still-
wouldn't disqualify them in any
Correct.
way, it just would give them a temporary solution
Yes,
while the Air Force figures it out.
correct.
Okay, and then in terms of, so there's 4 wells, it sounds like that you would focus on first.
Mhm.
And then the other 17, is there a time frame of
Um,
like, cause it sounds like the 4 wells you said maybe by later this year, am I understanding that?
Yeah, it takes some time. Obviously, we have to get contracts in place and do proper paperwork, and then we have to go through the typical process where, one, we have to contact the owners to see if they're even interested. You'd be surprised how many people are not. And so we go through the legal process of making sure they're on board. We have to do our engineering assessments and calculations. It all goes through public review after that's all been determined. And then after that, we have to, get access agreements to their homes and make put the efforts in place to do, whatever was selected for them, whether it be a POET or a municipal action. So it does take time.
Okay.
But yes, the plan is to do the worst of those 4 or 5, whatever it is after the next round of sampling. And then finish them and then move on to the next wave.
Going to the municipal wells that are just above the MCL, so they're not considered 3 times. Where does that stand?
As I mentioned, it's of course the first policy, that's a decision that's above me.
So, but my understanding is that there's already been efforts to put like a design in place for those wells.
By the city, yes.
Yeah, so, so if the city were to come to you and say, well, we're ready to actually implement the treatment, the Air Force would say, we're not giving you money to do that yet?
There would be negotiations, but likely it would be probably, I can't speak to that. I'm not involved in that part of the program. But
Okay,
yes, and the city has made, and you've got your city representative right there. So he has made initial contact, and so the processes are beginning.
okay,
It doesn't initiate a timeline or anything like that. It all has to be negotiated and worked out and the legalese taken care of.
okay,
And there's a stepwise process
Yes.
too, where the initial, we just need to get the final design started, it's gonna take a while to get that done. And then predicted to take 2 years to build the treatment facility before it can follow well. So there's definitely a time crunch to this, so.
right, and I think,
Push.
right, and the longer we wait, the more expensive things are gonna get, and, so,
Yeah.
we already have a city that's been proactive and aggressive, so it would be, a disservice to our community to have those efforts slow down or be stalled out, So we'd like to see that continue to move forward. So,
I will do my best.
messaging, so, it sounds like you have sent letters and you've made phone calls. The messaging in the letters, you worked with the select board to message the letters?
Yeah, I basically the letters are written by myself and my consultants and are approved by, of course, the program. The messaging is, simply that, what are your results? What do they mean? And then, at the request of your community, I also included in my phone calls that option to contact the select. So, I think it's great that the selectmen are putting forth their own time and effort to take care of that. I think that's great. Obviously, Peter's involved, and so it's a really nice stopgap that we will. And the messaging reflects that.
And in terms of the wells and where they're located, though, there's still that limitation, like DES doesn't know who these people are. Even Newington
They
doesn't
are
know.
always given the option to contact them, and I encourage them to do so. Not only Peter, but also the health side of it as well. They're concerned.
Right, but to answer my question, DES doesn't have a list of these well owners, right? And same thing with Newington, they don't have a list either.
I can definitely not give it to them. So the residents have to contact Newington on. But yes.
Peter, have you heard from anyone in Newington?
No. I've been in open discussions with Martha Roy a number of times, making sure they have all the proper contact information. They can disseminate the Sculpin, New Hampshire, the PFAS rebate program that can give up to $5,000 for somebody who has a filter system, or up to $10,000 for a municipal connection. But I think my last communication with Martha was a few weeks ago. I don't think anyone had yet tried to take advantage of that.
And Chris, does the letters to like the 4 versus the 17, do they say anything different?
No.
So the letters that are going out are all the same? So, because we talked about this in the last meeting, is like, how do you message to some people like, oh yeah, you can get treatment right now, but you have to wait and we don't know when. That's a hard message to like put into a community, so so it sounds like you're giving everyone the same message.
An MCL exceedance is an MCL exceedance on the face of it, yes.
Right, but the Air Force has taken the policy that they're not gonna treat everything the same, right?
Well,
They're gonna
they
start
are,
with
everybody's
the
gonna be
first-
given the same option, but on the first approach, yes.
Right, and there's no clear timing as to when the 17,
Correct.
so you're not treating everyone the same, right?
So it is the policy in place and there's nothing else, that's what we have to follow.
Right, so I think just like, put yourself in the shoes of 2 neighbors who might be like, I'm getting treatment now and you have to wait. And trying to understand how you can reconcile that, when the EPA would say, both of these wells are exceeding a safe limit. But we're gonna help you right now, we're gonna help you, but we just don't know when. Like, that's a hard thing to grapple with in a community, and I think that's the feedback I've heard from Newington, is that the concern about how are we messaging this to people and what can we do? I'm glad we have this state program that can help people temporarily, but it's a reality that the people in Newington have to face, so, and I just don't think.
Yes,
you're
I
not
sympathize,
putting
I do.
policy.
If I could do something other, I would.
I would think that if the solution in that scenario, the neighbors side by side, is only with a house filter. But that may be the reality that one house is getting the treatment sooner than the other. I would hope if the solution is a connection to the municipal line based on where they are in Newington. If this house has 3 times the MCL exceedance and this one only has 1 or 2 times the exceedance, then the Air Force would then be able to look at the benefits of, if you're out there with the equipment making a connection right next to each other, then maybe they could make an exception on a case by case basis. Save everybody time and money.
Well, and again, I mean, I don't want to jump to conclusions in that particular scenario, but one person may not want that.
That's true.
And it may, and then the process starts over.
Sorry, I can't see your name, I
Oh, sorry.
apologize. Bradford, go ahead.
So Chris, without identifying these 21 individuals as wells, is there a pattern for the 4 without describing a location? Are you seeing a pattern? In some sense, could it be they're drawing up more water, they have more powerful pumps?
Oh, I have not looked into it in that level of detail, honestly.
But is there a geophysical pattern of which wells are 4 times?
Again, I haven't looked at it
Okay.
that heavily. It's not a bad idea. I mean, obviously, as we get into the planning for implementation of this. As Pete said, if there is a pattern or if there's a row of, where we could put in curb stops, kind of develop some sort of economies of scale, if you will, with our responses, then we would take that. But yeah, we haven't identified any patterns like that yet.
Yeah, because looking back
From
historically,
the data that I've seen, I don't, I don't know the exact addresses, but I don't think we really have those patterns. And just to remind folks, even though we're talking about the worst first, the actual worst have already been done with. There are 8 or 9 private wells that have already had filtration or municipal connections. This is only in response to the new, lower VASL that triggering additional action.
thank you.
So, I don't know if there are more questions on this. I know it's definitely an important topic. We do have one more agenda item that we'd like to get to before the break. So folks are okay. I would suggest we move ahead with that. So this is the, you do have one more question?
Yeah,
Okay, Mike, please go ahead. Yeah,
So on your scorecard of outstanding items.
Yep.
That you finally circulated before the meeting. That didn't include the commitment that had been made. I think that's documented in the minutes at the December meeting, that there'd be a quote, small working group to work on this letter.
Yeah.
And was, I'm not sure, has the town of Newington okayed that letter?
They will not, because they don't get to see the letters, but I took their messaging requests, and yes, obviously we did have that small, not official, I guess, we didn't have a.
No,
I didn't record it, but yeah, we took in the people, so, their inputs and their concerns and put it in the letter. As far as notifying them, but particularly the phone call follow-up. Which is where, specifics were addressed, that were at the request of the people. Folks like yourself.
You don't have to put it on, I guess.
I thought that it was mentioned in there. Yeah, I thought we had it when we.
Our task.
Yeah, on our task list, but I might be mistaken. I can go take a look. Okay, anything else on this before we move on to the? Okay, great. So we're gonna move on to the community involvement plan update. I'm gonna pull up.
Consent, but
Okay.
it has to be shared slides.
Yep, I will. So I just have 2 slides here. Okay, I just want to confirm that. Go ahead and share.
Yeah, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can, David.
Okay, great. You want me to turn my camera on or are the slides just gonna block it anyway?
I think it's always nice to see folks who are presenting, and we can see you on the screen, so go ahead.
Here I am.
Good.
Appreciate y'all having us tonight and letting us take a few minutes on your agenda to kind of talk about where we are with the community involvement plan. I'm here with Shauna Jones, also from Aegis. That's who I am here with. And we are contracted to do a number of these community involvement plan updates or at some of the BRAC bases in the country. So tonight we're just going to give you a brief overview. You can go to the next slide. The community involvement plan is something that has to be updated periodically. That's an EPA requirement and an Air Force requirement. Community input is the main thing that we've got to do to make sure that we can design a plan that will be tailored to the needs and concerns of the community. So many of you may have either received or even participated in the community survey that we sent out back in March. And we sent out a number of surveys through email and some through mail. I think I have the numbers on the next slide. But the purpose of that is to gather input from the community so that we can understand what the concerns are, how best to address those, and how best to communicate with the public, since this is primarily a communications plan. And so that's what we were attempting to do with the survey. Next slide. So here are some of the details of the outreach efforts for the community involvement plan. We emailed 73 people, which we had on a list that Chris provided for us. We also mailed postcards to 27 people that we had a physical address, but no email address. And then we published a notice in the Portsmouth Herald on March 14th that in all of these communications linked people to this, excuse me, the survey that we wanted people to fill out. The survey was 10 questions. And it was just allowed people to kind of give us an idea of what their concerns were and how we can communicate. We also put flyers at Portsmouth City, Newington Town, and the Langdon Library. And we had those on display until the 30th of April, which was when the survey closed. We had 44 people respond, and then we had 2 individual interviews that we conducted on the 16th of April. The SIP current status, SIP, that's the acronym for Community Involvement Plan. It's been drafted and we have the, it's now gone to review. So Chris has it, some of the other Air Force people have it, and they'll review it. We'll address those comments as it's going through Air Force and regulatory review. And then once that's all done, it'll be published, and then we'll have a plan in place. And if you have any questions, Chris is your point of contact, and he will pass anything that we need to do on to us. So with that, I'll take any questions that you guys may have.
Okay, questions for David? All right, Andrea, go ahead.
Hi, David, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I'm just curious, will this be we'll get like a document when this is all said and done with the plan in it?
Yes.
And do you have a time frame on that?
Shauna, do you have an idea of when the schedule says we're supposed to be done with all this?
We are, we're expecting the reviews to go through, definitely through June. We plan to have a finalized plan, I believe by September. The plan does go to the EPA and we incorporate their comments too. So, it'll take a little bit of time for that.
Are you able to share any reoccurring themes or, anything that you obtained through these surveys and interviews, and, are you able to give us any substance of what you learned about our community and what you think should be in that plan?
Yes.
Well, we can give you some things.
Yeah.
Right now, a lot of the stuff that the conclusions will be something that'll have to be dealt with through the review process. But I can tell you what the results of the survey were. We found that 89% of the respondents live or work near Pease, which means about 10% don't, which we found a little bit interesting. 80% are aware of the cleanup at Pease. And then some of the major concerns, and I think you guys, this won't be a surprise to anyone, PFAS in the drinking water and the associated health effects, and people wanted to ensure that the PFAS cleanup would be complete when it's all said and done. And so that was kind of a reoccurring theme through many of the questions that we had. Most people were not aware that documents related to the cleanup are available on the online administrative record on the web. 7% said they are receiving information, and those that get the information appreciate it and want to keep getting it. But people want more information, and the best way to do that is through email, and they like it about 4 times a year, and or when something significant happens. About a third of the people that responded believes people's concerns are being addressed properly or adequately. So that leaves a little bit of a gap there that we need to fill somehow. And the people want the Air Force to engage more with local governments and civic organizations to keep them informed of the civic process. And they also suggested posting links to information on these organizations' websites. So when the plan is completed, you will get a comprehensive list of everything, all the survey results. And because the surveys were anonymous, they won't be personal, but you'll get a statistical breakdown of the responses to each question. And you will see all of the handwritten comments. If any of you took the survey, you know there was a multiple choice thing. You tick a box, and then there was a place for you to type in additional comments or concerns or questions that you had. All that is in the plan. And so when the plan comes out, you'll be able to have a chance to go through it all and see how everybody responded, which I think is a really good thing for y'all to see. Did that answer your question, Andy?
Yeah, it did. Just one final question. Did you say only 7% of people said they're receiving information?
Correct.
Was that a shocking number for you?
A little bit.
Yeah. Thank you.
We hope to improve that.
All right, well, David and Shauna, thank you so much, both of you. We're gonna move to our break now. So it's 6:35. Why don't we give 10 minutes? Come back at 6:45 and we'll continue. But again, thank you so much to David, Shauna, all our presenters from this morning. We have more to come, but appreciate everything. So we'll see folks in 10 minutes. All right. So again, just a reminder, if you haven't signed in yet, please do so. We are gonna get rolling on our next agenda item. So we're gonna hear a presentation from the Air Force on the P's 5-year review, and some of the community comments and questions that they heard. So we'll have a chance for presentation and per usual, some Q&A. So let me go ahead and pull these up. Okay. Great. Okay. All right, so who from the Air Force is going to be our presenter? Okay, great. Please go ahead and introduce yourself for us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm Deborah McDonald. I work with ECC, and we're working with the Air Force. We're doing a lot of the other work around the base that's not PFAS RI related. And we spoke, I think it was last April, first on the 5-year review. So we're back to give an update, review some of the information that we shared, and then also respond to some of the questions that we received from the community. Catherine?
Hi, I'm Catherine Guido. I'm with ECC and here to assist in answering of questions.
Thank you. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so actually these first few slides that we have, if you do remember from over a year ago, some of them are repeats. They're just to refresh everyone's memory about the 5-year review process and the circle process in general. They're also going to help serve to respond to some of the comments that we're going to be discussing a little bit later. So the 5-year review process, and this is the 6th 5-year review for P, so 30 years into it.
Only 30 years.
I know, it was a quick 30, but 30 years, yes, into the initiation of implementing remedies and cleanup. The 5-year review process starts after remedy in place. So you can see we have a star next to the remedy in place, and this is the circle process, starting with the preliminary assessment, site inspection, remedial investigation, and ongoing through feasibility study, design, actual construction, and then you have the remedy in place. So, and we were tying into the other presentations, the PFAS RI is obviously back at the remedial investigation phase. So these are the sites that already have a remedy in place that are included and evaluated in the 5-year review. Next slide, please. So what is the 5-year review? Again, I'll try to be quick. If we need to go into any more detail, we can do so, but it's basically a checkup of the sites that have been remediated, where we still have contamination levels that do not allow for unlimited use. So there's still something left at the site there. And so every 5 years, they're reevaluated under this, under CERCLA. They have remedies in place, as we mentioned, and those remedies are to protect human health and the environment. And those can include something as simple as land use controls or LUPs. So during the 5-year review, the implementation and performance of the remedy at each site is evaluated, and a determination is made if the remedy continues to meet the requirements that's specified in the decision document and if it remains protective of human health and the environment. And if you remember, this was kind of a topic we went into a little bit more detail last year. It includes an interview process where community members familiar with the cleanup program are interviewed, which we of course did do for our 6th 5-year review. And then relative to the information that's available for folks to look at, this is just one document that's produced every 5 years. There are many documents that are available for public to review. We have an on-site, a physical repository still here at Site 8 that we maintain. And then there's the online Air Force administrative record. And then there's also the New Hampshire DES one-stop system as well, the repository. Next slide, please. So the primary purpose of the 5-year review is to, again, evaluate the effectiveness of a remedial action at a site. And again, it all comes down to this protectiveness determination. It's an evaluation to determine that the remedial action remains protective of human health and the environment. and whether it continues to operate as intended. And I guess a significant point to point out that we'll talk about in a little bit is also to see if any changes in site conditions or regulations could impact the effectiveness. Next slide, please. So again, this was included. There were 20 sites that we refer to as surplus sites in the 5-year review. And by surplus sites, if you remember, these are sites that are not fuels related. They're not petroleum related. So they have another type of contamination at them. Those fuel related sites are monitored under the DES program. Next slide, please. And one other point that we'll probably be going back to again is that there's a review period for the 5-year review. Obviously, it's a lot of data in 5 years to be collected at all of these sites. And there's a review period where you take that data and then you evaluate it. And that review period is the context that you're looking at when you ask these questions about protectiveness. So the review period for the 6th 5-year review was January 2019 to December 2023. So that's the data that's looked at, and likewise, that's the guidance and regulation that's also considered when evaluating the protectiveness of the site. Next slide, please. All right, so we're going to kind of start to address some of the questions that were asked. So one of the questions was in relation to, we refer to rebaselining sites in the 5-year review. As part of some of the work that we're doing at PEAS, there were a number of sites that were identified that required some additional maybe investigation work or additional valuation work beyond what was already going on under the LTM, the monitoring programs. These sites were chosen in close collaboration with the regulatory agencies, with New Hampshire DES and with EPA as well. And 4 of those showed up in the CERCLA 5-year review as CERCLA sites, sites 32, 36, 22, and 10. And there were 4 other sites that are also undergoing this rebaselining process. Those are fuel sites, so they were not included in the 5-year review. Next slide, please. So the technical assessment that is done in the 5-year review, where you determine whether it's still protective or not. First, you explicitly ask these 3 questions. Literally, these 3 questions are asked, and then they are answered within the body of the 5-year review for each site and the remedy that's at that site. So those questions are, is the remedy functioning as intended by the decision documents? And question B, are the exposure assumptions, toxicity data, cleanup levels, the remedial action objectives, are they all still valid when they were, from when they were chosen at the remedy selection? So has there been any changes that you need to take into consideration? And question C, is there any other information that's come to light that would call into question the protectiveness of the remedy? So those are the 3 questions that are asked for every single site. Those 3 questions are asked to determine protectiveness. So next slide, please. So protectiveness, there are 4 different terms that are used to say, what's the protectiveness of this remedy at this site at this stage? In the 5-year review. So the first one is protective. And so this ties in directly, all of these terms, whatever the determination is for protectiveness, all tie back into the answers to those first questions, those A, B, and C questions. So it's determined that the remedy is protective at that site if the answers to questions A, B, and C provide sufficient data and documentation to conclude the remedy is functioning as intended and the risks are currently under control, and they're anticipated to be under control in the future. So that's protected. Next slide, please. Another determination term is short-term protective. And that's when the answers to those 3 questions, A, B, and C, provide sufficient data and documentation to conclude that the risks and exposures are under control. But the data and documentation also raise some issues that could impact future protectiveness or remedy performance, but not the current. And the current being that review period that we're currently looking at for whatever that 5-year period is. Next slide, please. So the next term is protectiveness default, the third term. And that's used when the available information to those questions, A, B, and C, does not provide sufficient data and documentation to conclude that all human and ecological risks are currently under control and no unacceptable exposures are occurring. So you just don't have all that data to make that determination. That's protectiveness deferred. And then the final one, next slide, please, is not protected. And that's when you have the answers to questions A, B, and C, where you do have all the adequate data to conclude that human and ecological risks are not currently under control, and the result may be not protective. And it includes an immediate threat that's present with a new exposure pathway, for example, and is likely to assume that its unacceptable exposures are occurring. Migration of contaminants is uncontrolled and poses an unacceptable risk to human health and the environment, or potential or actual exposure is clearly present and there's evidence of exposure. So that's when you have all the documentation and data that you need to make these determinations, and that would be not protected. Next slide, please. So another, and that was in response to one of the questions saying maybe it would be a good idea to review what protectiveness, what those terms mean, because every single site and then overall, there's a protectiveness determination. So that's what those terms mean. And those are the explicit guidance that we have for assigning those protectiveness determinations for each site. For another comment, it addressed the remedy at site 8. And it was, the question I think was, let me refer back to here. Excuse me for one moment. So it was looking at the site 8 interim remedy, and actually there's already been some discussion about this one. So hopefully that might have addressed some of the questions that were contained within this comment. Some of them had to do with receiving additional information or updates, which I think was already addressed by some of the presentations. But it also, there were questions about, the performance and operation at site 8. So the remedies at site 8, the groundwater treatment by the treatment system, groundwater monitoring, transitioning to private wells, to the municipal water supply LUCs are functioning as intended. So the system is continued to be monitored by the Air Force for performance, and obviously work is being done to address any issues or perform any upgrades to the system and get that working as best as they can. Additional PFAS data from the ongoing RI may raise issues that could impact future protectiveness, but not current protectiveness. And therefore, the protectiveness determination is short-term protective for site 8. All right, next slide, please. It's a lot of terms, so I'm trying to pause in case anyone has any questions. But one of the other comments that was received had to do with waste disposal. And this was in relation to removal waste that had occurred back in the 1995 and 1996 timeframe. And this is when some waste was removed from one of the landfills, deposited into another landfill with an engineered design, and then some was taken off-site. And the question was whether that was we were able to do that at that time and the location, and we don't have the location. From 30 years ago, looking back through documentation, we have found no documents that actually name the location of where the waste was taken. However, it's perfectly legal to take waste off-site. We do so today. It was legal back then, as long as it goes to, and this is the term that's used, is an appropriate facility. That's done on a regular basis, as we just mentioned with PFAS waste going to a Subtitle C facility. Next slide, please. And regarding new development, so there was also a question relating to, you know, what happens if, there's gonna be some new development at a site? And, really kind of what does the Air Force do in that place? And if the Air Force does any testing, and analysis, and really new development is the property owner's responsibility. The Air Force does on some properties, as we mentioned, some of these properties, part of the remedy are land use controls. And those land use controls are captured in either the deeds or, you know, some other property transfer mechanism that the property owner, needs to follow. But, as far as any further testing or use of the property goes, that is the responsibility of the property owner. And I think that's all we had for the slides. Next slide, please.
All right, thanks so much, Deborah. So we have about 15 minutes for questions from the RAB. So floor is open. And we have, I guess, both Deborah and Catherine here to field your questions. Right. Our leadoff hitter, our MVP.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So I'll start with, so you talked about waste, but we also talked about soil. So can soil from Pease be moved offsite?
Yes.
Okay. And, in terms of an appropriate facility, you said there, it doesn't appear that there was, is there no documentation to say where back in the 90s where this waste went?
In any of the reports that we've reviewed, the historical reports now from 30 years ago, we don't have a name of a facility. We have not found one.
Okay.
I
Is that,
mean,
is that unusual?
No, I can probably recollect, I mean, I think. I can use an example, where sometimes, when we did, it was work, we consolidated waste management units, landfills, and. So I think part of that, there was always sort of a procedure where, you know, because of the history, if there was any sort of things that were noted as being potentially. It's like hazardous waste or hazardous materials, they would be segregated, and then usually they would be characterized, and then they would go off for appropriate disposal. So I know that did occur. I think probably there is some record related to, I don't know if you were able to find any of the construction completion reports for some of the work out there. But as I do recall, I mean, through some of this intrusive work and remediation. I do believe, yeah, there was the appropriate sort of, you know, was again characterized into appropriate TSDs. Or I can think of one site in particular where I believe that landfill 5, part of landfill 5 remedy was to sort of remove waste above the water table after it was capped. So some materials were discovered in those. I believe those were probably there was documentation. Just trying to. Again, this is old document, but you know, that would have been, I think, within the reports that sort of show the completion of the remedy by the contractor, then usually provide that information, those details as to where it went. But as Deb said, these are old probably reports and documents.
So what about now? Is the documentation more thorough?
Oh, yeah,
If things
yeah.
were taken off-site, there would be.
Yeah, I mean, it was then, and it is now.
So what are the bills of lading, anything was transported, the definitely was done.
There's what's called an off-site rule, so any sort of superfund waste that goes off goes through this. And I just actually did it for another project before everybody came in a little while ago, but material that goes off we have to verify that the particular facility is going to can accept the waste. There's no sort of any issues related to their status as being accept waste. And so that's what I do on a regular basis. So, and we did it back then. So I just can't obviously put my finger on some of the stuff that happened like literally 25, 30 years ago. So, but that's what we do. That's what we do today. So if some of the material that goes off from the treatment systems at Ames or Site 8, so it's typical that through the process of just validating that anything that's leaving a Superfund site, and it's called the offsite rule. We just make sure that it's not going to some place that's not that has some issues with compliance or anything like that. So, and usually all this, like I said, everything that goes off is like like Pete said, there's all kinds of documentation and data that basically characterizes the waste. So,
In terms of, like, there was a newspaper article about a daycare being established for the Air National Guard and possible, like, the city of Portsmouth using land for fields. And, your response was more that that would be the responsible property owner. Would, in that case, who is the property owner? Is it the Pease Development Authority? Or if it's Air National Guard, is it Air National Guard? And if it's city of Portsmouth is gonna obtain land for fields, like who's responsible to test and, you know, make sure that it's safe to put those things in those places?
So PDA would be the property owner, if they own the property, whether they're leasing it to somebody else or not, they need to make sure that whatever the restrictions are on that property need to be adhered to. So, or, you know, it's National Guard or whoever does own that property, that's their responsibility, even if they're going to be leasing it out to someone, whatever the case may be.
Is Jared still online? Would he like to elaborate on his process at the PTA?
Yeah.
Or
Jared is online.
Yes.
Jared, are you with us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
So PDA as the property owner would ensure that whoever is developing the lease parcel do a phase one, and if a phase two is needed after the phase one to evaluate whether it's soil, groundwater, whatever the issue at that particular site may be. So we would pass that responsibility off to the developer, whoever is going to be leasing that parcel.
Okay. And forgive me, because I don't understand that process. Is there guidelines for the developer for a Superfund site in terms of what they would need to test for, or is there like a protocol or something?
So there's the thing, Pease has what's called the area of special notice request. So anytime there's any proposed subsurface work on Pease, the first thing Jared would do when he's notified of that or approached with that is compare where that work is occurring with respect to any of the waste sites. If it's within any of those waste sites, those are characterized as area of special notice. The PDA has to make a written request to the Air Force. And the Air Force has to provide an opinion as to whether that impairs or impedes their ability to meet their environmental responsibility of investigating and cleaning up the waste.
Okay.
Air Force usually reaches out to us and we concur. We will review the data and say, well, this is a site that historically had chlorinated solvent contamination at still small level groundwater impacts. We provide all that information to the PDA, and then they would have their developer take the appropriate precautions and the appropriate testing.
I see.
So that if they're gonna generate excess soil, or if they have to manage groundwater as part of their development, then they have to take all that into account through that process. So that sure it's all above board.
Also, groundwater modeling with sites.
The developer has to do that? Okay.
And the other part of it is, so if it's on the Air Guard property, they're not part of the area of special notice request, but they have their own installation and development plan. They know where all the contamination, identified contaminated sites are on their property, and they will go through the NEPA process or any other appropriate process to do whatever work they're gonna do there. And then last but not least, there's a handful of federally owned parcels, the Passport Center, the Visa Center, and an undeveloped parcel, and that's where the is interest in potentially doing a daycare center for yard, the shipyard, or whomever. So they would go through that same environmental review process to understand if there are any known risks at these sites and what are we to do to identify that.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that. Very helpful. Just one other thing that wasn't addressed. So we asked, will the Air Force be addressing concerns for severe weather and or potential sea level rise in their future efforts?
Oh,
that was something that was mentioned.
Yes, no, so that, that actually ties into the review period. So the first question was the lead memo, the 2024 lead memo. So that falls outside. Yeah, my apologies. I had it in my notes and I skipped over it, but that falls outside of the review period, that lead memo from EPA with the 2024. So that would be, considered during the next 5-year review period. And then for the severe weather or potential sea level rise for future efforts, that was actually rescinded by the current administration. So unless something changes, it wouldn't be, but who knows what's gonna happen, so. Okay.
But we are looking at groundwater elevations constantly, so if it's something like a landfill that is designed to be above the groundwater table, if that groundwater table, for whatever reason, were to be rising over time and threaten to inundate the waste, then that would be a problem we've been looking. Hopefully with the Air Force to remedy that.
Okay.
That would change the protectiveness for sure.
Sorry, I'm just reviewing our questions. So outstanding. Yeah.
Good site A.
Well, yeah, we can go to Mike and then come back to you, Andrea. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, site A. Surprise, surprise. So. By the standards that you have to apply and that you well laid out here. When you determine a site remedy, and this is a significant site, there's no question about that. It's the one site that was documented as administrative record. It's having PFOAs in 2019, so there's no question about the significance of it. When you say you reach the conclusion that the site should be characterized as, or the remedy effort should be characterized as short-term protective, that means not only that the current exposures are currently under control and no acceptable risk, which I think has been at the center of the report originally, and like you told us tonight, but it also means that the data or documentation review raises issues that could impact future protectiveness or remedy performance, but not current protectiveness. And I guess it's astounding to me that even though the Air Force has recognized this and adopted a significant program to pretty much rejigger the whole operation of Site 8, and we had earlier questions about when that's going to be completed, and has sought, they can tell you how much money, but significant amounts of money, and I'm sure competed against other sites to get that money to be able to do this at Site 8, that this report doesn't really, all it says is things are down for maintenance. It doesn't say it's not functioning anywhere near close to design capacity throughout the 5-year period. This report is not going to be an effective vehicle either to inform the public of where this is headed and what's happened. It's not an effective vehicle to be able to compete for funding to do the right thing in Site 8. I don't understand why why all the problems at Site 8 that no one's hid, everybody's aware of, aren't documented in the 5-year review. Why don't you? You can still reach your conclusion to say it's no unacceptable risk. But this has been a nightmare for them and for the community in terms of feeling that the one place that was causing it all to go in off the base and into Newington isn't being addressed the way it was designed to be addressed.
Well, I can answer part of that, Mike. It is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It is maintaining capture of the Site 8 plume. That is happening now at its current flow rates. Our other efforts to increase that flow rate is to, speed along the cleanup process to remove more mass and just, maintain as much as, the long-term capture of all that product. But it is absolutely operating as designed.
So the data is showing that in those brooks, in all of these locations, the levels may be going down, but it's not showing it's not there. It's not showing it's not flowing through there from site 8. It's still coming off site 8, isn't it? It's just acceptable as an interim remedy. I'm not arguing that. That's a determination that's been made. But you wouldn't be spending all the money you're spending to do all the things that was outlined if the Air Force didn't know that the thing isn't performing the way it was hoped to perform, designed to perform, believed to perform. So it's ignored, it's whitewashed in this 5-year review. I just don't, it's not in the Air Force's interest to do that. Never mind it, the community or anybody else. That's my concern. That was the RAB's concern. I think we laid it out actually pretty well. I should read what we wrote, which is a lot less emotional than what I'm saying here. It's a lack of candor that bodes poorly for the future communication efforts with with the communities involved.
If I can clarify one thing, I know it's sort of weird, but so there is the whole surface water, so in the report, basically, it's much less. But it does speak to some of the drainages that do receive, in part, site 8 contamination. So if you look in the report, it's OU 11 for the race-wide brooks and ditches. So that, again, that is a connection. That is one of the media that is in part, that media, especially nice Pickering, are affected by site 8. So there is a broader determination as it relates to site 8. And it really does. We've made it even less, is that deferred. We even made it protectance. We sort of even deferred protectance. We haven't even fully assessed through, remedial investigation that's forthcoming. So I know it's parsing some of the, but I think, I sort of agree what you're saying, but I think it is sort of covered in regards to the media that's also, the surface water media that's very prominently impacted by site 8, which is, again, they deferred it because we haven't got to that point now. So
I'm totally in agreement with deferred being the characterization, but I'm saying to you, accept the characterization that you have, but there's a second part of that, and that is saying what have been the problems that you're going to have to overcome in the next 5 years, or whatever the period is. And if you don't acknowledge these things, how do you build support for doing it?
Yeah, I do think, that
somebody, if I were, on the House committee and somebody confronted me with the 5-year report, I'd say nothing to see here. That's what it sounds like. That's the way it comes across. It's not in the Air Force's interest to do that. I mean, you're not hiding anything all along the way, and then you get to where you say what's been going on for the 5 years, and it's not there. It's a maintenance issue. I don't think so. It's way beyond maintenance. And that's why you gotta spend all the money you're trying to get and spend. Okay, thanks. I made my point.
No, it's a valuable perspective. I do appreciate you sharing it. And we see things from our perspective as well. It's great of you to share that. It's something to think about, and how we address that is, to be determined, but it's good to hear.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mike. Is there any other responses on this question? I think about the use of the report moving forward, and also the concerns about sort of how this was characterized. And if not, we can move on in. Okay. All right, go ahead, Andrew.
I'm just curious, I don't know if the last two questions were addressed in the presentation, so I just wanted, for clarity, I want to be sure. So the second to last question, community members have concerns that there is such a delay in addressing the more stringent PFAS standards by deferring the entire site protectiveness to 2028 when current exposures are potentially occurring. What information does the EPA have that can be shared with the RAB and the community that demonstrates there are no current exposures happening from contaminated private wells and those private wells where POETs have been installed? Community members have concerns that an answer will not be available until 2028 or later. I don't think that was addressed, but
Can you read that again?
Yeah. Yeah, we had like a whole paragraph about context too, so I don't know if that would be, maybe we could put that as an action item. Phil,
Sure.
maybe.
Sure, will you name it to me again, Andrea? So I can-
Yeah, it's on the
Mhm.
Ease RAB community questions and comments from April 11th. It's the second to last question that we can
Okay.
have
Second
called
last
already.
question,
And then the last question, it talks about 11 private wells that were above the New Hampshire AGQS. And our question was, community members want to know if all homes on POETs were also connected who were also connected to the municipal supply or those without POETs. And if not, are those wells being monitored and evaluated against current groundwater standards to ensure these users are protected?
Yes, when they have poets, they are not also on the municipal system.
Right, so anyone that is on a POET system, you still routinely test them. Okay, and do you know that anyone, because we talked about there were more, there were 8 or 9 wells that were connected. I don't know if they all got POETs, but there were 8 or 9 wells that exceeded the prior standards. Is the treatment in those homes effective against the current MCLs?
Yes.
Okay, so that's being monitored. Okay, that was the question. I think that is it for this.
All right. Just looking around the room, I don't see other hands up, and we do want to get to the RAB community member topics of interest. So thank you, Deborah and Catherine, for the presentation. RAB members for your comments and questions. We're going to press forward to the next agenda item. So Andrea, I can pull. Are you going to be doing the presentation on behalf of the community? Great. So let me pull up your slides.
Sure, well, I want to clarify one thing about what you just asked. So I think there are 2 POETs that the Air Force installed and monitors, and they sample the whole system to ensure that they see what's coming in. They see that they're meeting the filtration objectives going out. There are 2 other POETs, one that was transferred to, they were offered a municipal connection, they refused, and the Air Force transferred the maintenance of that POET to the property owner. The Air Force only samples their influent water. It's the responsibility of the property owner to maintain their own system. So we're not seeing whether that system is being properly maintained. That's up to the property owner. I'm sorry, there's another one as well, but so there are 2 properties that I'm aware of that have filtration systems that the owners need to maintain, and I don't know whether they do any sampling or whether they follow the manufacturer's guidelines to properly maintain those, but I hope so.
Why are some, the Air Force does more comprehensive testing and others not, because they've chosen that?
So in that one case, they offered to make that property did have a municipal line in front. They offered to make a connection. The property owner said no, and the Air Force said, well, you have to take over your POET system. Those are your options.
Okay.
And then the other one, it was the property owner proactively went out and bought their own system, installed it themselves, and they actually didn't have an exceedance that the Air Force at the time would react to. So
Okay. But that home is still sampled?
the influence is sampled.
Okay.
Concentrations are actually gone down, I believe, but
Okay.
therefore the system's not been sampled.
Okay.
If you're not maintaining them, then you're not gonna have water, so.
That's where it'll come to.
Yeah, so I imagine people would maintain them.
When you say POET, are
Point of
they,
entry treatment system.
sure, so does that mean a sink filter or a whole house?
That's the whole house.
And is it carbon? Okay, yeah, we just had 3 topics we wanted to raise tonight. One was the monthly newsletter reporting on site. We've had a lot of discussions and feedback on that, so And then the other one is an update from the UNH Community Foam Sampling Project. And then the EPA made an announcement last month on the MCLs that they set last year. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so we'll start with the EPA announcement. So last month, EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin announced some changes to the PFAS MCLs that were set and finalized a year ago in April. Essentially saying PFOA and PFOS would stay the same at 4 parts per trillion, but the municipal systems had till 2029 to follow that, and now it'll be pushed out till 2031. So they're keeping the levels the same, but the implementation is pushed out 2 additional years. And then there were 4 other MCLs that were set last year that the EPA is now going to rescind and relook at, and that was PFHXS, GenX, PFNA, and PFBS. So so that's, you know, that's a significant change. That's a big difference from the EPA last year versus the EPA this year. And one that I think is important for us to pay attention to. It certainly will impact our work here in some ways, and in some ways it may not. And so it was my hope to just provide everyone that update. And if you go to the next slide, please. Mike Daly was great to create this chart because even though we have the EPA MCLs, New Hampshire also has their own MCLs that they set, I believe back in 2020. So even if PFHXS and PFNA are taken away from the EPA, we still have New Hampshire standards that apply. And so, Mike, I don't know if you want to explain this, you're probably better at it than me, but kind of, you know, any thoughts from the EPA side of what this means for Pease and the work that we do here? And
Yeah, I think the last 2 columns are, again, you see the, the May announcement dropping, and then, the April promulgation. I mean, the numbers are, they're relatively close. PFHX, New Hampshire's numbers a little bit higher, but I mean, I think PFNA is essentially the same. And I think one thing that I think I can confidently say with regard to GenX, we've never found GenX at Pease, and I've yet to see it in any of the sites that I've worked on, so I don't think that's an issue. But yeah, that's sort of the announced change.
okay, I know in terms of what we see a lot of, we saw tonight, PFOS is a big driver here at Pease. We see that a lot. So having that MCL stay the same is, a good thing for us, at least on the community side of wanting things to be more protective. But PFHXS, I know that was the PFAS that was found highest in the blood of the Pease community. So, and that also is linked with firefighting foam, and we do see that here as well. So, off the top of your head, Mike, Chris, Peter, do you anticipate any changes with that MCL? We already have the 18 that the Air Force would have to comply with. So do you expect that that will change any of the work that you do if that one were to revert back to the the New Hampshire instead of the lower EPA?
Well, we've asked this question on the Air Force. Won't you guys know that you got a little battery and will crash in a second?
That was making me nervous too.
There are a handful of monitoring wells around the base where usually PFAS is the driver, just about every media. We've asked this question to the Air Force. They came up with a handful of monitoring wells where PFHXS has been higher than PFAS. So some of that contour line may change a little bit, but in terms of the overall definition of nature and extent, we don't see that that's going to have a significant impact. And on the private well side, we understand that one property that currently is on bottled water was waiting Air Force action. Remains to be seen, perhaps with this next sampling round, whether they're going to be in the worst first category still, or if they'll have to wait for either the concentrations to go up, which is triggered by PFAS or PFOA, or we'll be waiting for the next iteration of action.
And the other thing to think about too is, it's not, these treatments, the technologies are being used either somebody's houses or at Al's plant or plants. I mean, they're being removed, so the treatment technology is not selected just to be for us, so from a practical standpoint. If there's treatment placed on this contaminated groundwater, these materials are affected. Just again, from a practical standpoint.
And so, yeah, that was another question I had in terms of private wells. It sounds like there's one that may. So, as again, we don't know the data of the private wells, but we had talked about this on our planning call. PFOS is usually the driver, and that one is not changing. So is that your understanding, Chris, that the 21 private wells are the exceedances because either PFOA or PFOS
No,
or?
I don't know. Actually, there are quite a few that are PFH accessory. Right now, there is no law change. So right now, the Air Force is proceeding current law.
Okay,
But
with
yeah.
the 10 essentially,
Yes, exactly. Until it's officially changed,
you're gonna move
that's,
forward.
that's current law.
Yeah, I think that's what's unique about, again, there's the announcement, but again, as I understand it, again, I hope I'm not wrong by saying this, but I believe that, right, this rulemaking will have to sort of follow as it relates to that announcement, as far as I understand.
When I was singling out the one private well, because they were in 3 times MCL exceedance. So I don't, we're actively waiting for, the list. What private wells are gonna get action first?
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you, and yeah, it's. From the community side, it's disappointing to see the EPA come in and rescind 4 MCLs and also delay the implementation of 2. I think the EPA last year was very clear, these numbers are based in science, they were to protect public health. And so to see that change or the announcement of that change a year later is quite disappointing, and we're fortunate at Pease that we have state MCLs. There's lots of states that don't have state MCLs. They don't have other protections to fall back on. So that's just my commentary in general on the announcement. That's just disappointing. But thankful that we have New Hampshire MCLs too, and thankful that the Air Force is gonna follow what the current law is and see what happens. To be continued as always with this PFAS discussion, so. That's it for this topic. I don't know if anyone has any questions, or if not, we can move on to the next. Okay.
I don't see any, so.
Okay. Yeah, this one I didn't have any particular slides prepared, but I just didn't know if we wanted to have a discussion. I know there's been lots of back and forth about the newsletter, which we are very grateful to get every month. It's helpful to just keep us connected to what's going on at the site, even though we don't meet all the time. But I know that there's been feedback around different metrics that we'd like to see on the newsletter. It was in our comments as well. And so I just wanted to open that up if any RAD members wanted to share any feedback on that.
So floor is open, any feedback on the monthly newsletter, the opportunity? Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
So, it's much improved. And the element that would, allow it to be very useful, particularly going forward, and to document the effectiveness of all the new improvements that are going to be coming online, would be to have some kind of quarterly assessment where you could compare it with prior quarters or prior years or prior months. Right now, it's just a dose a month and of information. So if you want to,
Are you looking for something like flow rates over time, or?
well,
Is it-
I'd
if
be
you have a
glad to
specific
go over to Peter's office and talk with him for 15 minutes, and I bet we could come up with something that wasn't onerous at all for you to be in a position to quantify over time where this is going. And my assumption is it's going to be a good story and it's going to show it's getting better. But whatever it shows is, right now, if you want to compare any measurement about the operation of Site A, you have to go back and review either now your reports, I think, are much been a victim of the good work you've done, I guess, but they're very good. But they're a snapshot of 1 month. And I had a little bit of experience with some sites and my experience is that you always are looking at sites as this thing's been in operation now for how many years? 8, something like that. 6 anyway. You look at it over time as to reduction in concentrations, hopefully, or if it's spiking seasonally, you get to see that. Monitoring if you're having problems, particularly in the winter, running the system that can help explain it. But there's no communication about any of that. Is in a historic context.
So I'm just gonna check in what makes sense as a next step on this, if this is something that,
Like I said, I think if I went over to Peter's office and talked with him, I'm sure there's something
You're welcome to do that anytime.
I know I am.
And I hear exactly what you're saying, and I mean, I get that there's a limited amount of information that Chris wants to convey, or not wants, but is able to convey in a short monthly update. I'll remind you that the Air Force does produce these very lengthy, both for Ames and Site operations, maintenance and monitoring reports. They had been on a 6-month basis, so January to June, July to December, for all 6, 7, 8 years of operation, where they map out the hydraulic control areas, they look at concentrations being detected there. As deep a dive as you want to get in there.
Yeah. This isn't about going back and looking at. That's the last thing I think anybody wants to do this at this table, is to go back and look at how this system performed. It's going forward, be able to put it in a context. I mean, you can reach back for a year's results, so you're gonna be able to show you what the incrementally as you add these new improvements, hopefully it'll show improved results, and that justifies why you spent the money on some improvements, right?
Sure. So,
But it also gives the public some assurance that over time, this is an interim remedy that's working. It's a way of communicating. And I don't think it has to be, even, there's probably not 5 things. You would be helpful, Peter, because you would know which ones are the important ones.
I was gonna suggest that the figures that show the hydraulic capture, I mean, the frustrating thing with those OMM reports is they take a year to produce, so you are looking back in time. But if there was some, I can't speak for WSP, but they're the ones working the magic on the computers. If they were able to provide, semi-recent figure that shows this is what the hydraulic capture was, either this month or maybe last month. Sure.
I mean,
that would be,
then you get it's something that simply would give you a tool to simply communicate the function of this. You can do line graphs, I mean, right,
So I think the request is clear. Do we want to, as a next step, I mean, do you want to connect and then check in back, then Peter, you can kind of bring the outcome of that conversation to our planning call as a team with Chris and we can.
Yeah, I mean, we'll bring it back to everybody.
Yeah, we'll bring it back to the group.
We don't have an option. So
we'll put this on our actions list and, yeah. Okay. All right, anything else on the monthly newsletter?
Have you ever looked at all those O&M reports? Have you ever looked at one? Just.
No. Have they ever been given to the rep?
They're on, they should be on some of them.
Yeah, they're all on CAR.
Yeah, no, I'm not reviewing.
Well, maybe not reviewing, but perhaps, this is just a suggestion, perhaps, again, through that very sort of technical deep dive and the summation of the data and the presentations are quite good. So maybe interpreting that, maybe on a lower level, maybe as a topic, maybe for one future RAB meeting, maybe a good idea. So again, we get the scientists across the room here. So, I mean, they're the ones that put them together. And they can sort of get into exactly, what they're trying to depict and, and the other thing I want to sort of highlight, which I think can't be understated, can't be overstated, is this is an interim remedy, so this is not the final remedy. So, working towards, not to say that we're just, we'll just limp along, we're not gonna again, we'll get, finish the RI and we'll get to eventually a remedy for, what will be a final remedy for this PFAS problem at the base. I do foresee, if I could crystal ball site 8, I'm imagining there's gonna probably be some more modifications and changes to, exactly perhaps more sort of, I would assume from a practical standpoint, more potentially more groundwater extraction in other areas that will further help mitigate the migration. That's what I see. If I had to spitball this thing. But we're not there yet. So, that's, but that's, again, that's where the time and circular sort of get,
The problem is if we've been
I know.
talking about
Sure.
site 8 since I've been on the RAP, and I'm never, I got an indeterminate sentence at this point.
I think those O&M report, maybe like a quick review, or we can pick the latest one. I think it may be enlightening for folks to. Yeah.
I do just want to know, we want to get the public comment. We're kind of bumping up here, and Andrew, I know you want to present on foams as well.
Yes,
So-
can I just make a quick request?
Mhm.
Could those, like the last two of those reports maybe be sent to the RAB, or can you flag like which ID number they are on the AR? So we could look at them and then maybe have our SEO people look at them too, help us.
Okay,
Yeah, that's a good.
yes, noted.
Okay,
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Andrea.
All right. Please be patient with me, I'm not a scientist. So as people know, I presented at the RAB and I've been talking about the concern around foam for a while now. The other states have gone out and tested foam around waterways and have found highly concentrated PFAS in the foam. And so it's something I have wanted to see done here as well. A little over 2 years ago, I had an opportunity to send 2 samples into the University of Florida and then did not hear from them for a substantially long amount of time. And then I finally did hear from them last month with some results. But in the meantime, last year I called UNH, Dr. Paula Mauser. She has done some other presentations in Newington on PFAS, and she has also done a lot of work at looking at PFAS in Great Bay and wastewater discharges and various amounts of PFAS work. So she was very responsive to my call last year and applied for a New Hampshire Sea Grant to do some pilot testing of foam around Great Bay and also Barry's Brook. Rose LaFresco is a RAB member. She's not here tonight. She lives in Rye and has also seen foam accumulate around Barry's Brook, which is, somewhat close to the Coakley landfill, and also had similar concerns. So UNH helped me create these slides with the preliminary data. So that's why I said, just be patient with me. I'm not a scientist. I'll do my best to present it. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So I took 2 samples myself back in April of 2023. One was off Corporate Drive, and then the other one was on the Newington Greenland line. I believe it's Newington Road. And then with UNH late last fall, we collected some other samples as well. Broad Cove, Grafton Ditch, Barry's Brook, and one other place, College Brook, it looks like. So just here's some pictures of the different foams that we observed and was able to collect. And I should say Dr. Paula Mauser also has a graduate student named Gabby, who is coming out and actually doing the collection. So it's a way to train a student as well who has an interest. She's a master's student working on this issue. So it's been a really nice collaboration to have a scientist like Paula and a student, Gabby, and a concerned community member like myself and Rose to bring a real concern to a university and have them apply for funding and work on a project together. So if you could go to the next slide. So here is some of the preliminary results, and I'll mention Paula is sending the samples to Temple University in Philadelphia. And they've been wonderful to work with. And there's also another scientist from UNH who is looking at organic materials in the samples as well. Her name is Ashley. And so for Broad Cove, I think the the overall results, and again, this is where I'm asking you to be patient with me, is that a couple of the high level things that we saw is that the concentration of PFAS in general was much higher in the foam than in the surface water below. So 2 samples were taken at each location. One was a surface water sample and one was the actual foam. And in the samples in particular, PFOS was mostly concentrated in the foams compared to the other PFAS. And so so the top one, for example, Broad Cove, there was a total of 732 parts per trillion of PFAS in the surface water. And of that, 133 of that was PFOS. But in the foam, there was 4,813 parts per trillion of total PFAS in the foam, and 3,252 of that was PFOS. And so foams had a much higher PFOS concentration than the surface water beneath. The PFOS in foams concentrated 24 to 235 fold, where the total PFAS was 7 to 114 fold. All samples had considerable dissolved organic carbon, which may influence the foaming. That was a note that Dr. Mauser made. And then the starred samples, number 5, those were the 2 samples that I had collected from the University of Florida. So those levels are there, but that's why they're missing some of those other testing, like the carbon and the nitrogen and things like that, because UNH is doing that other sampling. So I just wanted to give you a snapshot of what we have found so far. Gabby did go out and do some additional sampling last week, and there is a plan next week to go back out with Paula, and News Center Maine is going to cover some sampling being done next week as well in Great Bay. So there'll be some media coverage. The Boston Globe, I did share an article with all of you. The Boston Globe did cover some preliminary data on this that came out, I think it was February or March. So I'm just really happy to see that we were able to get some sampling done and we were able to confirm what is being seen at other places. I don't think any of this data is shocking or unique to Pease. I think this is what's being seen in other communities across the country that were proactive in testing. And if you go to the next slide, I can talk a little bit about the next steps. So because of this preliminary testing, UNH has submitted a proposal for a much larger grant to do more expansive foam testing in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. Paul and I presented to the Newington Board of Selectmen back in February and asked for a letter of support, which they did give us, which is great. But right now the proposal decision is upheld due to federal funding uncertainty. So I'm not really sure where that's going to go, but the hope is that this pilot project leads into more expansive testing. We talked about some of the press. So News Center Maine's coming, Boston Globe, UNH, the New Hampshire Sea Grant, did a podcast that's coming out this month, and it interviews myself, Paula, Gabby, just talking about the different people that worked on this project. Hoping to do additional foam sampling, and then next week, New Hampshire DES has a drinking water source protection conference, and they have invited Paula and I to come and give a talk about this project, to share the preliminary information. So, and if you want to go to the next slide. To me, this is the most critically important thing. Again, like I said, I don't think this data is shocking to anybody, or maybe it is, but it's not inconsistent with what we're seeing in other places. It's very consistent. And other states have issued fact sheets and educating people about what to do if you see surface water foams. And so New Hampshire DES put out a fact sheet earlier this year. It's 3 pages. This is the first 2 pages. And if you go to the next slide, Toby, please. This really talks about essentially if you do see surface water foam, what should you do? You should not touch it or interact with it. Don't let your children play in it, your pets. And if you do come into contact with it, wash it off with soap and water. So I'm just, again, grateful for this. And one thing I'll just say to put a final point on it, I think when it comes to the foam, there's so much about PFAS, I think, that we can't see or understand. We talk about it parts per trillion, you don't taste it. So when you see foam in a community where you have high contamination accumulating on the waterways and on top of the water and around the shorelines, to me, that makes the contamination a lot more real and tangible for people. And unfortunately now, every time I go by Great Bay, I can't unsee the foam, like I see it. And people I know now take pictures and send it to me too. Like it's there, and it just makes the contamination, I think, more real for people and something they can't wrap their heads around. And again, just grateful to UNH for the partnership and New Hampshire Sea Grant for the funding and, you know, that we're gonna continue to study this and learn more about it. So, that's it. If anyone has any questions, I'll do my best to answer it, but if anyone has really detailed questions, I can certainly put you in touch with Paula Mauser at UNH, who could speak to this a lot more eloquently than me.
Great. All right, Andrew, thank you. Really, really fantastic work. It's great to hear about. Yeah. We are nearing the end of our meeting. It's almost 8. So unless there's, you know, burning question or comment related to the film research, we'll press forward. But again, thank you. Great.
Yeah, of course.
That great work. So next item we want to give, so we have Al here from the city of Portsmouth.
Very brief.
Great.
Talk about the drinking water system a little bit. So as you know, the spring has been, the weather's been cooler than normal, and we've had some good rain recently, which has been great since they cut us out of the drought. We were in a drought since last summer, and through the winter, the drought was persistent. So thankful to the rain this spring, and we're back to normal conditions now. With groundwater levels and our supply levels have risen back up again. And demands haven't picked up like they usually do this time of year, so our May water demands have been lower than normal. We're expecting with the weather changing like it was today, I suspect the demands are gonna crank up very soon. Typically early June is when we start seeing our peak demands and people start irrigating. And we're ready for it. Our Pease plant is geared up. We have 4 resin trains online right now, so we're capable of pumping 690 gallons a minute through there. And the PFAS removal efficiency is fantastic. The new resins that we've installed, the Calgon-based resins, have been working very well with the differential pressure concerns that we had in previous resins. So that's all working well. I just commented about the Portsmouth and Collins wells. Those are 2 wells that are in the Portsmouth system, but they've been impacted by the PFAS from Keys. Those 2 wells, we have gone through a process of getting the basis of design together, preliminary design for treatment for those wells. Now it's at that point of moving ahead with the final design, and that's where the request to the Air Force, just to get us to that next step of going through the final design, is in place. So we're hoping that we can get that soon. Keep moving with that project.
Great. All right. Thank you, Al. Appreciate the update. So we are now, so members of the public, we are now at the public comment portion of the meeting. So if you were interested in making a comment, first of all, thank you so much for sticking with us and waiting until this time. Now's your opportunity. We'll give members of the public who are interested in speaking typically 3 minutes to offer a comment, but let's just see, are there folks in the room or online? Great, I see 1 member of the public online who's interested. We'll promote you in a minute so that you can speak. Anyone in the room interested in making a comment, members of the public?
I think we lost.
Yeah, we lost them. Yep. All right. Go figure. Well,
I would say that one of the folks said like that.
Right. The widow wanted to speak.
A member of the Brad said that she felt her questions had been answered.
Had been
That's why
answered. Good. Okay, that's good to hear. Thanks, Mike.
But it could be more questions. She's one of the Newington property owners.
Okay.
That it's not a high priority.
Okay. All right. Well, we have Hagai. So Hagai, do you want to just introduce yourself, your name, where you're from? You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, sure. My name is Hagai Nassau. I'm with SKIO. We are the technical advisor for the community through the EPA's Technical Assistance Services for Communities program. And I just had a quick question for either Air Force or EPA. We are scheduled to review a baseline ecological risk assessment work plan, and I think it's not supposed to be available until August or later. And from the presentation tonight, it sounds like the ecological risk assessment sampling has already been completed. So I'm wondering what's the purpose of we're putting together that work plan at this point?
Yeah, want to answer that?
I can answer that, yeah, sure. So the work plan that is under review right now is a presentation or an analysis of documents the analysis, the statistical analysis approach to analyzing the data. So there was a work plan that dealt with, or a tech memo that dealt with how we were approaching the field sampling. And that occurred last fall. And then there's a documentation of how we analyze that data and perform the analysis for the eco risk assessment. And that's the work plan that is currently.
Okay, thank you. Very good. All right, just checking anyone else from the public? Okay, great. Andrew, you have
Just a follow-up to that, so because SKIO was approved to review the work plan to help the community understand that, so is the work plan, I'm sorry, I don't understand. Will there be a work plan for SKIO to review to help us understand
Yes.
it, and when will that be available?
Yes, so we have comments back from, we developed a work plan, it went to the Air Force, we got comments back, and we're working through Air Force comments right now, so. I don't know, without Tony here, Tony was the person who presented last time, he would probably have a better idea of the specific time frame.
So, yeah, I can give you, so they're actually, we went through this at Loring Air Force Base, so I think some of the internal review and comment that WSP was able to resolve, made a really great work product, so I received that Loring product not that long ago, and everybody had 2 comments, so it was received well within my eco risk assessment team. So I imagine once we receive this, yeah, I mean, it will be available for us to review, and I think we should be able to quickly review it, and then, you and SKIO can take a gander at it.
Okay,
So I think that was always planned.
yes, okay.
So, but
It's more the timing, I guess.
the timing is right. So I know sometimes these things, right, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into these things, but I think with, at least the Peace Project, I think has benefited from just us going through the exercise of morning. But as far as sort of sort of this, almost the site problem statements are almost exactly the same as Loring as Peace, pretty much. So I think we should be able to, I think, once we get it, we should be able to process it rather quickly, resolve any issues, and then you guys should have it for, SKIO and your review.
Okay, can we put that as an action item for the RAP community members to be alerted when the work plan is available?
Oh, yeah,
For SKIO to review?
Yeah, I mean, since we've added this, as we agreed to add it to the work, to the scope. Yeah, I'll be the first to probably call it. Great.
Okay,
I can make sure you have it, it's available to you. Thanks, SKIO.
great, thank you.
Okay, so I have just a couple of action items that I captured from the meeting. One is follow up on the second to last community question on the 5-year review.
Good second.
Okay, the next was so Mike, you were maybe gonna check in with Peter. We're gonna have a little liaising about how to update the quarterly reports with that kind of timeline demonstrating progress, so we'll follow up on that. There's a request to send info on the last 2 OMM reports. And then finally, this last piece here around alerting the RAB when the ERA work plan is available. Anything else that we might have missed in terms of action items? Okay, obviously, we'll be working on a summary and getting that out to the RAB for your review as soon as possible, and we'll be in touch when we have a schedule for the next RAB meeting as well. Let me just check in with Chris. Anything else you'd want to add?
No, my action items check out with yours. That's good. I just want to thank everybody. I thought this was, we got through a lot today.
Yeah.
And it was a good discussion. So I appreciate everybody's time and the contributions to the planning efforts and getting these all put into place. And we had a little bit of scrambling. We had some traffic issues today, but it came together nicely. So thanks, everybody.
Great. All right. Thank you, Chris. Thanks to all of you. All right. We'll see you soon. Okay.
Thank you.